The Nationals will commit nearly $500 million to build a dam in central Queensland. The 970 gigalitre site will have the capacity twice the size of Sydney Harbour and provide affordable water supply for mining. The pitch is it'll create jobs. The coalition hopes it will be a bit of a sweetener to voters across these must-win seats like Dawson, Capricornia and Flynn. Joining me live now is the Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. It's been a while. Welcome back to the program. First of all,
It's
is
a
it
pleasure, Laura.
true that this dam was first raised as a prospect in the 1960s and there's been 25 feasibility studies since?
That would be probably correct, and I'd be responsible for another one of those when first iteration as Water Minister when I've got further business studies done. But it's really quite simple. The Commonwealth has half the money, private enterprise has half the money. There's a lot more money that will turn up once the dam is constructed. The state government doesn't have to put a dollar in. They just have to say they're going to do it. So we've put the money aside. The state government have to say we want to do it. And if they're not controlled by the Greens, then that's precisely what they would do. That's what I'd do. If someone said, I'm going to build a dam in your state and you don't have to pay for it, I'll be all over it like a bad suit. So let's see how they go. But Rookwood Weir took forever for us to get going. It's Emu Swamp, all these dams that we're building and we want to continue building, and also Dungowan in New South Wales, they get held up by these innumerable studies, this study, that study, business case study, another study. You move tons and tons of paper, but we've never moved dirt. But I want to drive this agenda and say, okay, there's money on the table. Private enterprise is going to put money on the table. All you have to do, Queensland Labor government, is say you want to do it, and we're into it. But if you don't, we've got, what can I do?
Why hasn't this gone ahead to now? You talk about moving paper rather than moving dirt, but is it an environmental approval that's standing in the way?
Well, they needed a contribution from the government, either state or federal, and the federal government and the Nationals within government are pushing and making sure this happens. People make fun of us, but we're very, very pro-dam, pro-roads, pro-dam, pro-railway lines. We like to make sure that we build the infrastructure that makes our nation as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. You look at the geopolitical circumstances of our time, and one thing that screams at you is the world's changed and Australia has to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. And that means we have to capitalise on where we make money from exports, and our agricultural exports and our mineral exports are the ones that they're 8 out of 10 of our biggest exports. And this dam helps us do more of those.
I mean, you need to retain seats in Queensland, so let me be cynical for a moment, Barnaby Joyce. I'm not usually cynical, but let me just be for just a moment. In North Queensland, you need to retain those seats. Why is this a priority for you rather than, places in northern New South Wales, for example, that have just suffered these horrendous flooding?
Okay, well, if you propose a dam on the upper reaches of the Clarence, you'll have a massive demonstration. I get furious about that. Maybe times are changing and they'll want dams. And it's the same thing at Lismore. If Lismore comes forward and asks for dams in the upper reaches of their river, well, that's a different scenario to what we've had in the past. I'm happy to be a part of that, but obviously there's a strong green link there. And a lot of people there don't like dams, but maybe that view has changed. We want to get a dam built at Dungowan, but it's held up near Tamworth by yet another study that, surprise, comes to its conclusion after the election. I have always tried to drive Scottsdale in Tasmania. That must admit they've been very good. We're actually getting dams built down there, and they've been doing a great job. But once you deal with state governments, you get this incredible sense of inertia, and we want to get around that and just get moving. Now, Urana is in an area where everybody wants this dam built. So the people want it, we want to do it, the local members want it to happen, and the Queensland government doesn't have to pay for it. So, okay, we've set you forward the most perfect scenario where you can just come out, Anastasia Palaszczuk, today and say, we're going to do it. So get out and do it.
Okay, over to you, Queensland Premier. We'll wait to see if we get a response from her. Let's talk about the budget, because we're not far away now. The cost of living is the top of the agenda for every election, I would argue, but I think the petrol price, inflation, the prospect of interest rates going up has put it into sharp focus ahead of this budget and this election. So what's the government's best idea on the table here about how to alleviate that? You're not still talking about fuel excise, are you?
Well, the cost of living what is a function of a whole range of issues. Inflation starting to come back into play. Another big issue, of course, is what's happening in the Ukraine. And what Mr. Putin decided to do, because 40% of Europe's energy requirements come from Russia via the Ukraine. This has caused massive problems, not only in energy prices, which is petrol, of course, but also food prices, where 30% of your barley and wheat come out of the Ukraine, out of the Ukraine and the west part of Russia. We've also got problems with timber. When Mr. Putin goes to the Ukraine, the ramifications go all the way back to your supermarket. They go all the way back to your price of timber. They go all the way back to your fuel, to the fuel bowser. And which one do we actually change? Obviously we always review this. I'm not going to sort of predict what the budget might say, but what I have to explain is it's not going to be just fuel. Mr. Putin's going to be responsible for a whole range of a loss across a whole range of categories.
That's the whole point, isn't it? If you touch the fuel excise, it won't actually do anything to ease the cost of living.
No, it won't. But what it will do is it'll take away money that we spend on roads, and there are a lot of people who we still need to keep the roads moving. We need to keep the trucks moving. That's another reason we have to make our nation as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. Ukraine is startling for all of us, because we look over there and think we never thought this would happen, and it looks like the Ukraine are sort of dealing it overwhelmingly by themselves.
What can we expect from this budget? I know it's a couple of, not even 2 weeks away now, and I don't expect you to tell us what's in it, but what can we expect? Another big spending budget, or are you trying to actually at least, retain the facade of good economic managers?
Well, I think, if it wasn't, we had a balanced budget, obviously, then COVID turned up. So we're going to make sure that we have that as trajectory where we're going back to. I don't think it'll be too much way to say that the Treasurer, by reason of being in the coalition, is always very inclined to prudence and making sure that over the longer term that we are structured to get our budget back into balance. Now, obviously, to do that, you have to make the economy bigger. So, like you ran down the announcement today, it's about making our economy bigger, our economy stronger, so we earn more money. So that equation is easier to achieve. But we can't make our economy bigger if the Green Labor alternative is always saying no to any ideas that we come up with that actually increase our capacity to increase our exports. Coal is one of our major exports. And if we don't export coal, what else do they have in mind to take its place to pay the bills?